Okay, all right. So with that, we do want to start with, um, again, a quick overview of the RFP process. You know, we've discussed this a number of times in the past. We're really building on um, the visioning work that was taken on this summer, which itself builds on what we could glean from previous quality of life plans and other neighborhood plans, and discussions that we had over the course of June, July, and August with many of you and with others in the community. Again, the vision of the RFP is one of a holistic approach. So looking at the entirety of Englewood Square Phase 2, right, all of the city-owned land surrounding the Englewood Square Phase 1 shopping center, but really breaking that down into two immediate sites, right? So the firehouse site, where we were looking for renovation of the firehouse to support community and commercial uses. A mixed use building was proposed as part of that RFP. How can we add additional development to the firehouse site? And then surrounding, or I should say, centering that on a public plaza and open space, really delivering on the promise that came out of so many past quality of life plans, where a central open space, a dedicated open space, would appear at Englewood Square. It's something that wasn't really quite achieved in Englewood Square Phase 1, but we saw an opportunity here with the firehouse to achieve it in Phase 2. We also, of course, made available the 63rd Street site. So this site, through the visioning process, was seen as more appropriate for mixed use, street-facing development, including ground floor retail and housing on the upper floors. And then again, additional pedestrian realm improvements and open space associated with that, with the potential to expand that development further north as market conditions allow. And then again, what we consider package A, the northern extent of the site, we're holding that for a future RFP, wanting to take this in kind of iterative steps. Again, in terms of a timeline, the summer was really spent on visioning, developing the RFP, which is really that first step. It's soliciting the site. That, of course, went out the door in August, at which point development teams started preparing their responses. That went on for 3 months, and we got to where we are today, which is the end of the evaluation period, or nearing the end of it, I should say. And so that, of course, includes not only the DPD evaluation with our sister agencies, but input from you all and from others in the community. And then as we move forward, we'll have a negotiation and refinement period where the winning team's proposal will continue to be tweaked through review with the department, through review, continued conversations here with the Roundtable and with others in the community, and taking it through the necessary legislative process to turn it into reality. We are targeting groundbreaking on the project still here in 2021. So a lot of work ahead of us, but we're aiming to do that here over the next few months. Again, a reminder on the evaluation committee criteria. So this is what the evaluation committee has been poring over for the last several weeks as we continue to gain more information from feedback from the Roundtable and from others, and refined information from the teams themselves. 3 main categories. Does the proposal build community wealth? Is the proposal a great example of professional competence? And is the proposal economically feasible? And so these are the elements that the evaluation committee has been reviewing. And I think Commissioner Cox said it best, where the selection of this team is as much about, or the selection of the winning respondent is as much about selecting the proposal as it is about selecting a partner to work with in the future. And so, we think that that's critical as we look at these responses. It's not just what the pretty pictures show of what's on the site. It's also, is this a group that we think can pull this off, that we are confident will work with the community over the next several months to really refine this, and that we're confident will have an end result that is positively impactful. And then, of course, added to that are the community presentation feedback elements, including the online survey. So with that, I'll jump right into an RFP, a summary of the responses. Again, I won't dwell too much on this. We've seen these in December, we've seen these in January, but we've all got a lot going on, so it's helpful to refresh memories. What I will say is we're not yet at a point where we are selecting or announcing a winning team. We are wrapping up our internal evaluation, but we wanted this one final roundtable discussion to fully inform that decision making as we look to make a selection in the beginning of March. So that's where we are. So what you'll see here again is a bit of a refresher on what was proposed and the takeaways from the evaluation to date. So we'll continue to update that with the conversation we have today, but just know that we're not announcing a winner. We're simply indicating what the evaluation takeaways have been to this point. So as a reminder, we had four responses, I should say, on 2 different sites. The first 3 listed here all made proposals for the firehouse site. The final proposal was on the 63rd Street site. And again, you can see here the respondent teams. So I'll move relatively quickly through this. I'm happy to come back at the end and circle back through these, but I know, again, you've all seen these many times, so just a refresher. The Ignite Technology team, supported by DL3 Realty as a development consultant. Again, you can see here their team, a great team of designers and others on that front. What we see here in terms of their proposed uses: renovating the firehouse with a coffee shop and food hall, adding an entrepreneurial hub to the 2nd floor of the firehouse. Again, Ignite Technology running Blue Lacuna, pulling from that experience of what can be done from an incubator standpoint. And then adding to that with shipping container-based structure to support additional business incubation and small business development. And then pretty substantial open space plaza landscape proposal as well. They also proposed a future phase where the container development might be replaced by a mixed-use building or an office building. It wasn't part of their initial proposal. It was, this is what might come in the future, and they had given some thought to that. So again, a quick refresher: 1st floor of the firehouse, they envisioned a coffee shop, place for folks to gather, and eat food and drink coffee. And then on the upper floors, a co-working business incubator kind of space, again, run by Ignite Technology. The Englewood Accelerate facility was a container facility proposal, again, supporting small business or even larger business. You see here a Google logo. Could this be a place where established firms might create small outposts in Englewood was the thought. And then again, a lot of thought given to what the landscape might look like. Here we see a heavily programmed version of that, as well as what could be maybe a more open lawn on the south to provide space for events and activities. And then the plaza element as it fronts the firehouse. Again, as noted, they did pitch a phase 2, which would be replacing the container structure with a mixed use or office building. And they saw 2 very different, I shouldn't say very different, but 2 potential ways that could unfold, either as more purely office. You see here maybe a 2-story high floor proposal, again, as a phase 2, or a mixed use facility with ground floor retail or ground floor office space and housing above. So they thought about that in the next phase, but it wasn't part of their initial proposal. So what are the evaluation takeaways for this proposal? In terms of, on the left, you'll see kind of the broad takeaways from the evaluation committee across those 3 main themes. On the right, you'll see feedback we got from the online survey. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But the evaluation takeaways from the committee: community wealth building. The committee was impressed by the fully minority-led team, the demonstrated commitment to small business development and local economic development, largely through the business incubator and the accelerator, a record of prior equitable hiring from the firms involved, and relatively strong preliminary engagement of some stakeholders. And I think some understanding of who would be part of this development was appreciated by the evaluation committee. In addition, in terms of technical competence, The committee was impressed by the interesting and strong proposal for the firehouse itself. The team proposing this had experience of similar kinds of projects, good use of open space and design for the open space. The container development was kind of a good first step, but it was seen by the evaluation committee as not as impactful as a full-fledged permanent structure would be. And that was a bit of a, we think, a missed opportunity that this team pitched. Although again, there were benefits to how they were proposing that. Financial feasibility, they had demonstrated, access to capital and to financing, and the costs that they proposed were roughly aligned with what was laid out in the RFP on our expectations of, what we would see on this site. However, the financing for the container development was not confirmed in their proposal. It was more based on fundraising, which was seen as by the committee as potentially a risky endeavor. The online survey, just a quick recap of the online survey. We did open right after the January community presentations. We opened the survey for a week. We heard feedback that maybe wasn't quite enough time. So we reopened the survey for this past week. We had sent out another notice. We did get a few more responses. And so overall, this project received about 50 responses on the combined online surveys. It was rated relatively highly, 3.8 out of 5 stars, so nearing a 4-star rating. You can see here when we asked about community wealth building and competence and appropriateness, largely positive responses from folks, some neutral, but really not many negative responses. I think this was a somewhat of a crowd favorite. Folks really appreciated this. And so what excited folks as reflected in the survey, the business development program, folks really liked that. We even heard some suggestions. Could the Ignite Technologies incubator, could that idea continue to exist even if this team did not win? That's a very interesting idea and something we would certainly be thinking about if that's the way things end up moving forward. Folks like the positive treatment of the firehouse, the extensive plaza and open space, and appreciated DL3's continued interest and investment in Englewood Square, given their development and ownership of the Whole Foods shopping center. A couple of concerns included, did the project provide enough direct local jobs? Again, the incubator format is not one of immediate employment. It's more to allow startups to then turn into job creators down the road. Is that quite what we need at this moment in Englewood was a question. And container development feeling temporary, which it is by its very nature. And that was something that folks recognized. So I do want to just continue to move forward through the other 3 proposals. If folks do have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or note them real quickly, and we'll come back. We'll have plenty of time for discussion, but just to make sure we get through all 4 of these, I'd like to just continue moving, and then we can move back and forth through the deck as needed and discuss all 4 of these in more detail. The Imagine Englewood team, this was brought forth by a partnership of Imagine Group and Eastlake Management. Their design team was represented both by JGMA and Beehive. And so this was, we thought, a strong design team, a strong group that they had pulled together. Total project cost and proposed uses you can see here. Again, the idea was a culinary incubator within the firehouse that would include IO Foods, Wakana, and a ghost kitchen. And then the idea of retail wrapping the WIC building. Again, Eastlake owns the WIC building, and so we're offering the idea of incorporating that into the development. Townhouses, 10 units of townhouses here on the west side of the development, and a multifamily residential building in the center. Plaza and courtyard spaces surrounding that, including a community garden. And then, of course, the future phase building, another building, not part of the original proposal, but thinking and an idea of what a community center, a more full-fledged community center could be as essentially a companion building to that firehouse. This was the imagery that was provided, again, a very unique, provocative architectural style, We'll talk about that in a second. Some folks were fans, others not as much. But you can see here what on the left this might be. Let me go back one. So this again, looking to the south, you see the WIC building addition on the left, the multifamily building in the center, and the firehouse all surrounding a plaza. And then this is looking to the east. So this would be the phase 2 community center, the townhouses, the firehouse, and the multifamily building beyond. So takeaways here, again, a minority development team in the lead role was exciting to the evaluation committee, demonstrated commitment to small business development, a record of prior equitable hiring, and some strong preliminary engagement. This group really had a lot of letters of intent from organizations and entities that would be part of the proposal moving forward. Oh, and I see a note from Derek. Yes, thanks, Derek. Let me jump on that after I wrap this slide up, but thank you. Professional technical competence, unique architecture and design. Again, that was a little polarizing. Some folks were very excited about it. Others said, this does not fit Englewood. It does not fit the context. And so that was something we wanted to make note of. Team with prior experience of similar projects. The site organization itself. So the proposed site layout was challenging. It did not reflect the site organization proposed in the RFP. And we can talk about that a little bit more, but you can see in the site plan, sorry, I'm clicked on the wrong screen. You can see in the site plan, rather than an open space that kind of allows you to maybe continue connecting down towards the Whole Foods, things are really kind of cut off and bifurcated in a way that made some interesting spaces, but the committee thought was challenging. Financial feasibility, the experience was there. It was a higher cost project. And so the requested subsidy or incentive, I should say, was higher. And the overall cost of the project was higher as well, which was something that fell a little bit outside of what we were expecting from the RFP. Again, 50 responses, closer to a 3 rating out of 5 stars. You can see here more neutral and even a substantial amount of negative responses on community wealth building and competence and appropriateness, although still a plurality of positive responses. Folks were excited about the affordable housing component. The unique design was commented by several folks, and the large number of committed tenants. Not everybody was convinced about the townhouses. Certainly where they were located was a question. East Lake management's involvement, I think, was a concern to several folks on the online survey, and the open spaces themselves appeared a bit car-centric. So before I move on to the next group, Derek, thank you for your question. The evaluation committee, yes, it's a DPD-led evaluation committee, and this is the setup for all RFPs managed by DPD. On the committee sit members from DPD planning, from DPD zoning, from the financial incentives division of DPD. It includes members from CDOT, from AIS, which is our environmental and facilities department here at the city, the mayor's office. Don't believe I'm probably missing somebody, but I think that's largely everyone. Oh, historic preservation, of course, in our case with the firehouse. And so it's a group of, and DPD design. So DPD planning, DPD design. So it's about 12 to 15 folks that sit on that committee, and through several rounds of discussions and review, compiled the feedback you see here. So Derek, thank you for that, that clarifying question. Didn't want to get too far without addressing that. The third presentation, or the third proposal, of course, was also titled Englewood Connect. Somewhat confusing. I know we had 2 Englewood Connects. This one proposed by the McLaurin development team, which was partnered with Farpoint Development. So this, and you can see here the design team and what the future phases were. In fact, let me, oh, sorry, having some mouse issues. There we go. So at a site plan level, we can start to talk a little bit more about the program and the future phases. So the idea was a culinary center within the firehouse, hoop houses to help support some urban agriculture, I think that's something that we'll continue to discuss. I know that came up in many of the early rounds of visioning. I know there had been prior ideas for the site that included urban agriculture. I also know that we talked about whether or not production level agriculture is really appropriate at this site. So it was an idea where they were trying to draw from things. I think we can continue to have those conversations. They also have a business incubator, which did play on the shipping container theme, but they made it more a smaller component of the site rather than the key facility. And what they're titling the Englewood Living Room, which is a 8,000 square foot community hub to include performance space, dining, study space. We'll see some interior shots of that as well. In future phases, they've proposed essentially expanding the living room to include what they're calling the shed, which could be a more food hall and or co-working style space. Again, we'll see some shots of that. And expanding potentially or creating a companion building for the firehouse to expand event space associated with the culinary incubator, or culinary center, I should say. So here's a view of what that could look like, right? Looking across the plaza towards both the shed and the Englewood living room. Again, I think a lot of discussions still to happen on how would this architecture work? But I think that clearly a very exciting expression of urban design. You see here how that could be integrated with the plaza space and what that might look like. So again, the Englewood living room, a very high ceiling space, room for performance, for seating. Again, these images, as is the case for every single proposal, early stages, more to come on whichever proposal moves forward. And here we see a view from the shed looking over to the firehouse. No, Aisha, good catch. You did not miss it. This is how we can talk a little bit here about the evaluation takeaways for this proposal. So again, from the evaluation committee, community wealth building, minority development team in the lead role. We also, I think, the committee was excited by the partnership structure, which was 80% McLaurin development, 20% Farpoint, which allows, the committee felt allowed McLaurin to have the support needed to pull this off while being really in control of the project. Commitment to small business development, local economic development, record of prior equitable hiring. Again, these are all, kind of from the form submitted in the RFP. Opportunity to continue engaging local stakeholders and potential tenants and partners. That was something that clearly came through from our discussions and our review. Was this group, we'll see in a moment, or I can reference it right away, in the survey, we got a lot of positive responses about how willing and flexible this group was to continue to work with community. It should be said, though, there were also notes that, and I see other questions in the chat, so thanks everyone. I'll get to the chat questions in a moment. But the fact that this group had probably done less advanced homework of establishing local community partners and doing that outreach ahead of time. And so that was something that the evaluation criteria or evaluation committee recognized, but we did see positive responses from the community survey and from the night of their presentation, folks excited about the fact that they were willing to start doing that now. So that was something to raise. In terms of professional technical competence, it was an impactful proposal with positive transformation of space, good experience from the team. Design excellence was clearly on their mind in their proposal, and they proposed a schedule that generally aligned with DPD projections. Financial qualifications were there, as was the equity and kind of breakdown of those finances. One thing that we did note that I don't actually see here bulleted out is the idea that the phase 1 development maybe isn't quite as impactful as the full phase, full build out. So what would it look like to see all phases come at once was a conversation point that came up. This got about 30 responses on the survey. It scored very well, 3.9. Again, largely positive, a fair amount of neutral and almost no negative responses in the survey on community wealth building or competence and appropriateness. Folks like the mix of uses, the living room and shed, I think was really exciting for everybody. It was something that really seemed to folks to gravitate towards that. The plaza and the open space, and again, the flexibility and openness of the team to, I think from what they presented at the community presentations, folks said this could be a team that we could work with. What concerns you? The team had limited Englewood experience to date. That was something that definitely folks were referencing. And there was, again, a question about Farpoint's role, that was clarified as that 80-20 partnership. And again, I do see questions in the chat. I will come back to those one by one right after we finish this. Avia Park was the only 63rd Street proposal. So this again was DL3 Realty partnering with Mercy Housing Lakefront. Again, a strong design team with good MBE and WBE participation, as all of the teams had, but this one did as well. Proposed uses, again, you can see here, phase 1 is the left image. Phase 2 is on the right. Phase 1 would see a single building, 2,800 square feet of ground floor retail with around 65 affordable units above. That number, they said, could go up to 70, I believe. Phase 2 would see an expansion of that building to allow for a 6,200 square foot childcare facility on the first floor and an additional 60-ish units, as well as a larger open space to the north. Images of what we see here, 6 stories of residential above ground floor retail, interesting architectural design. This, let me just orient folks, this would be looking from the southwest. So standing at the intersection of 63rd and the 63rd Parkway, looking to the northeast. This would be from the Parkway at the break in the building between the phase 1 and phase 2. So kind of essentially looking due east. This would be a little further to the north. So again, from 63rd Parkway, looking back to the southeast. So kind of looking towards Kennedy King. And this would be how, the pass through for the parking lot. And another view from further east on 63rd. So standing essentially right in front of the CDC, looking to the boombox, I should say, as well, to the northwest. And here a view from behind, looking at how the open space and the kind of bi-level nature of that open space would work, and some views of their proposed park. So again, evaluation criteria. Again, most of these teams really did a pretty good job on the community wealth building across the board. This group had done some engagement, we know, with stakeholders, but there was also room for improvement there. Strong and clear proposal for professional and technical competence. One note was that the proposed phase 1 building far exceeded the scale that was established in the RFP. The RFP had said, probably 1 level of ground floor retail with, we thought, around 4 floors of housing above. This pitched 6. There's some merit to that. That also posed some challenges that we'll see in a moment. Design excellence was definitely taken on in the proposal. Although the overall program for phase 1, 2,800 square feet of retail and housing above, provided limited response to some community priorities. That was something that the evaluation committee felt, and it came through in the survey comments as well. Again, financial feasibility. This is a team that can, demonstrated that they could pull this deal together, but the overall costs of the project were fairly high, as were the requested city incentives, city support, and really outstripped what we were expecting in the RFP. A lot of that we think is tied to the fact that it kind of overcommitted on the number of units and the height and scale of the building. Again, 30 responses, 3.3 out of 5 stars. So all of these were relatively tight, but this one was, again, a little bit on the lower end. You can see the breakdown on community wealth building and competence and appropriateness, largely positive, but more uptick in the negative side as well. Folks appreciated the landscape. They appreciated the affordable housing. They, again, appreciated DL3's experience and continued engagement. Mixed use character was a plus, and the design, I think we got a few comments on. The amount of local businesses embedded here, the opportunity for local jobs was, I think, somewhat limited, folks thought. The overall density and building size, which again, the evaluation committee agreed with, that was maybe a little too much. And there were some concerns about Mercy Housing and whether that was the right partner to include. So that's what we had on that. I'm gonna go back to the chat box and scroll back up, because I know there were a number of questions, and I'll try to just take those one for one. But yeah, Alderman, do you wanna jump in at all as I look at the chat? I thought I saw you maybe unmute for a second. Okay, I'll just run through the chat comments here. I don't want to miss any of these. Can you show all partners on this project? I think I saw that come up during the 3rd project. Let me go back. Yes. Oh, sorry. There we go. So this team, you know, what's not reflected here, and apologies, it should be on here. This team did, we reached out to all the teams in January, all 4 teams, and asked some clarifying questions. And what came through in that round, which I believe they shared on the January community call, was a letter of interest from Brown Sugar Bakery in potentially being part of this development. So that's not reflected here. What did come up on the call in January was, you know, is there an opportunity for Englewood businesses to be on the ground floor, the metaphorical ground floor of this development? And so that entity is not listed here, but that is something that, you know, we do want to continue working on and make sure that, you know, whoever ends up being tenants or actual occupants of these facilities reflects Englewood and reflects community desire for use and participation. How would we know, I'm just reading the chat here. How would we know that 80-20 agreement? That was a question I have for every project, but was not made clear. Good question. So not all groups listed the exact, if a joint venture was proposed, not every group listed the nature of that, that proposal. So what I can tell you is for the Ignite Technologies, the first proposal, Englewood Connect by Ignite, Ignite would be the sole participant, essentially the sole owner of that development. DL3 was providing development services. Essentially, they were working as a consultant on that proposal. So they did not have an ownership stake in that. We did not get a ton of clarity from the Imagine and Eastlake partnership or from the DL3 and Mercy Housing partnership. As we understood, Imagine would be the majority partner on that project with Eastlake in support, and DL3 would be the majority partner with Mercy Housing in support. We did not get a ton of detail from them on where that breakdown stood. And that was something that the evaluation committee noted, that not having that knowledge was not as helpful. I see here a comment, 30 responses out of 50. Yes, 30 in total. Okay, so back and forth on how do we get 50 responses for some and 30 responses for others? Well, as we had two different nights of the community presentations. We wanted to get the complimentary surveys out as quickly as possible after those events. So we had one event on Monday, one event on Thursday. We broke the survey into 2 different links, 2 different sites. So we sent out Monday's survey, then we sent out Thursday's survey. We continued to follow up with both of those links. I think simply because of maybe more folks were able to join us on Monday. I think because, you know, you go through one link, maybe not everybody remembers to click the second link. We did get more responses for both of the proposals that went on Monday than we did on Thursday. When we reopened the surveys, we combined them. We made it one link, easy to go to. We just didn't get enough responses in that second round of survey to make up for the fact that there was an initial gap between the two. So yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Aisha, and for your question, Maria. That's how we ended up with 30 for 2 of them and 50 for the other 2. So yes, I mean, no statistical analysis could be done, and I think on both fronts, 30 people, 50 people, it's a subset. It's a pretty good response rate, as in terms of when we see survey responses. It's a relatively high rate, but it is, it's not reflective of everybody on that call. It's certainly not reflective of everybody in the community. It's one data point, one input in our process. I'm just scrolling through cost of project. That might be another, Maria, you might need to clarify that for me, the cost of project question. I'm not sure if that was one of these that you were asking for, but we can go over that as well. Oh, sorry, I didn't need to respond to any of this. I now see Aisha took care of it in the chat. Thank you, Aisha. And yes, you're right. It's not a high number of responses. It is a relatively large response rate for the number of folks on that call, but it's not an absolute high number of responses. I see a lot of back and forth. Yes, we may be able to continue extending the survey. We'll talk about that. I think I'll work on that with Jim. I do know that we want to make sure we are able to capture the responses to that survey prior to making a decision. So, but I hear loud and clear, and this is one more opportunity for us to sound the alarm of a survey being available, is this call. So Jim, I don't know if you have immediate thoughts, but you and I can coordinate, and if it makes sense, I think as folks are suggesting, to reopen that survey for another a week-long period or so, we can do that. But yes, surveys aren't reaching people. Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I mean, we're not reaching everybody with this survey. What I will say is the surveys are most helpful for folks who are on the January calls, but there's enough material online, and we share that whenever we share the survey link. There's enough background material that we do want to hear folks' thoughts, even if they haven't been part of the process. What I will say, again, is the selection of a winning respondent is but the first step in seeing the realization of that development. That's not to say getting as many voices at this stage isn't critical, but it is the first step towards continued engagement with the broader community base once a winning team is brought on board. I'm just scrolling through. Linda asks or notes, I think the Englewood Connect cost of 10.3 million wasn't complete. Yeah, so the 10.3 million proposed by Englewood Connect, which happens to be on the screen right now, would basically pay for the blue buildings that you see, not for the pink. And so that's, and many of the proposals pitched a kind of phased response and made their costs accordingly. I'm continuing to move forward. Same question about the partnership, but for the design team. That's a good question and a good point. We don't have detailed information about, say, at a percentage level, how one firm would work with another. What we do know is projects do need to achieve at minimum the city's 26 and 6 MBE WBE requirements. We look for firms, or we look for teams to far surpass that, and so that's another good point. And I think that's made it through the chat questions. So with that, I'll open it up. I'm happy to continue moving back and forth through any of these slides to answer any questions, or to just hear additional thoughts. Is there something that wasn't captured that you all wanted to share from what you saw at the January presentations, or from discussions after the fact, or your own review? Is there anything that the takeaways we've noted here haven't fully captured. And feel free to chime in or raise your hand, and I'll continue to monitor the chat as well if that's easier. Okay, Derek asks, can you speak to how much the weight of the survey will play into the final selection and who makes the final decision? Yes, so the survey element was brought back into, let me just page back up to the evaluation. Apologies for the PowerPoint vertigo that comes from quickly moving slides. So within the community wealth criteria, there's an understanding of community partnerships, and really all of these elements: commitment to equity, local hiring, and then again in the professional competence, responding to community priorities. So there are elements built into the criteria where the response of the survey helped define how the evaluation committee rated these respondents. So just to clarify, it's not, the survey is not weighted as, you know, X% and the evaluation committee's review as the balance of that percent. The evaluation committee is the sole body tasked with making the decision and selecting a team. But the survey responses, as well as the things written into the chat during the community presentations, the notes that we've received from conversations with the Roundtable and with others over the course of the last, you know, two plus months since the responses were sent in, all of that feeds into our understanding. But the ultimate decision does lie with that evaluation committee as stipulated in the RFP itself. But yeah, any other questions? And I don't know if I don't think I can see any hands at the moment, but if folks want to.
Hey, Lou.
Yeah, jump in, Dean Jackson. How are you?
Just a really quick, pretty good. Just a really quick question. If 30% of the evaluation to some extent is based on community wealth building, you know, to some extent, I'm not sure that community partnerships was completely fleshed out clear by any of the proposals. Before a final selection is made, it might be a good idea to ask each of the bidders to maybe put forth what those partnerships really are. It just wasn't, I mean, for us to base a good chunk of that evaluation on it and not have a lot of clarity on it. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's helpful. That's helpful. Thanks. I think that makes a lot of sense. We do have each of the teams submitted letters of intent or letters of support from any community partners that they had reached out to ahead of time. Some had more homework done than others, to be frank. The challenge to this, and it's something we're realizing and we're assessing and trying to move forward in future phases with addressing, is the fact that we gave respondent teams a bit of a tough task here. Number one, it was a quick turnaround to ask for that response. Number two, it's not always possible for teams to, as they're really just pitching an initial idea, to bring on those partners at this stage. In fact, asking for it at this stage was pretty early, which we thought was important, but it's not always possible to have those conversations. And then finally, each of these teams signed a confidentiality agreement, which allows them to continue to build a team, but does make it somewhat challenging to do more extensive outreach and more kind of fact finding and searching for potential partners. So I think to your point, we do want to make sure we understand the community partnerships, but we do see that element continuing to evolve even once a team is selected. But I think to address your note, that is something that we want to make sure we understand fully. And so to the extent that we still have questions, we will be reaching out to those teams to answer that.
Thanks for clarifying that.
any other questions or thoughts from the group on how the process works or anything like that? If not, I can move on to next steps. Feel free to add questions in the chat, raise your hand if you have something, or just go ahead and chime in. Let me see if I can quickly, you know what, let me see if this is faster. Let me just scroll down to our next step slide. Sorry, the big pictures are not cooperating with my computer. There we go. So in terms of next steps, the target is for early March to be when we select and announce a winning team. What may happen between now and then is the selection of finalists. At the moment, with all 4 teams still in play, any follow-up conversation must happen with all 4 teams. If the committee is moving towards 1 or 2 or 3 of the teams being clearly above the remainder, it may make sense to formalize that as in terms of finalists and those not selected to continue. That allows more detailed conversation to happen with those finalists before narrowing down from that to a winner. So that's not guaranteed, but just letting you know that may be something that comes about, but it would really be in the facilitation of gaining additional information from those shortlisted groups. So the intention is to have that selection and announcement made in very early March. And then we will be back in front of you all on March 17th, knowing who the winning team is and being able to craft with you all what the engagement strategy looks like. We've said really from day one that, you know, releasing the RFP is not the end of this. Selecting the respondent team is not the end of this. And we want to be accountable to that. And so once a winning team is selected, we can work with the roundtable to understand, and of course, you know, work with the winning applicant to understand what does engagement look like moving forward to get us towards a groundbreaking later this year. What is the cadence of that? What are the topics that are to be discussed? What's the outreach to make sure the right people are at the table for that engagement? That it's not just the roundtable. It's not come to the roundtable for 30 minutes and present. You know, we know we need to do more than that. We need to hold that development team to more than that. And so March, we'll come in March ready to talk with that about you, talk about that with you. Sorry, long day. And we may have other additional agenda items. As I think everybody's aware, we've been really focused on these RFP responses for the last few sessions. And rightly so, but there's other items that we know we want to discuss at these roundtables, including the public realm, you know, potential improvements, you know, streetscapes or open space, public safety. We know that that's come up on previous calls. We want to have those conversations. Housing. Patrick, I think, kicked us off before the meeting actually started, talking about what else do we do housing related on corridor, adjacent to corridor, and then additional opportunity sites. This RFP obviously has been our focus, but we know there are many other opportunity sites, I think about a dozen other opportunity sites on the Englewood, on the 63rd and Halsted corridor. And so what are we doing to mobilize those? What are we doing to support existing businesses on the corridor?
Yeah, and Luke, with that quick note, you know, we are going to open up the NOF application again on March 8th. So that's something else that we would like to bring back to the roundtables as well.
That's right. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, and so making sure that we're connected to resources, making sure that we are, you know, we don't want to lose sight of the RFP. We don't, again, this is not the last time we will talk about this site by a long stretch, but we also want to start incorporating other items in the corridor and in Invest Southwest to that. So that's what we'll anticipate in March, and then the same in April. We'll have continued review of this proposal, of the winning proposal, and we will again have additional agenda items as we continue to develop those. So with that's what we wanted to cover. I know we're close to time. I'd invite, I don't know if Alderman Coleman is still on. Alderman, if you wanted to say a few words. Otherwise, I don't know if there's any final thoughts from the group. But again, I can't, I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for DPD and for the city in saying how excited we are to be at this point. And Jim iterated that at the beginning of the call. It's been extremely helpful to have you all guiding this and asking important questions and making sure that the result of this RFP and the result of Invest Southwest is such that something that the community can be proud of and can really be a positive benefit.
Luke, Brian Haynes has a one
Oh,
last thought.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
Hi, Luke. I did want to say, so as a community member in Englewood, but also an architect, I appreciate the effort that's gone into this and what the commissioner, Maurice Cox and those folks are doing. But in one sense, this is way better than I think what we've had in the past. But in another sense, I think there's a long way to go. So having yourself and James Harbin on the call, it's like, I hope in the future as RFPs come out, we get more information. This feels very opaque from a community standpoint in terms of all of the details that are actually happening on the other side, and also that the decision is being made exclusively outside of our hands. It's yes, we get the survey. Yes, here's our input. We're great that you guys are doing that, but like it's kind of up to you whether or not you want the input and what you want to do with it. So maybe that commission or the criteria or who's actually making the selection on the next time this goes around, add some community members or points of interest. I know Maurice's kind of idea for specifying who's doing what, kind of dividing up the planning department is just starting. So we don't have necessarily a planner that we all know and think represents us in Englewood. But from some points of view, there's definitely some further progress that could be made.
I appreciate that. Thank you for the comment. I do think, we're continuing to grow and learn this together, and so there will be room for improvement, and this won't be the last opportunity either. So I think we'll continue to take that on and try to learn from. As you know, we're trying to do things a little differently than have been done in the past. We're almost certainly not there yet, and so we will continue to do that. Good question. Thanks, Dean Jackson. So, yeah, we will follow up with the survey. I think we can reopen that, and we will make that clear. Everybody on this call will get it, and we would ask you all to help us share that. The email itself would, as it has in the past, would include not just the link to the survey, but links to information that lets folks really make that input. So the video presentations, the Invest Southwest website, and so we'll work to make sure that can be reopened and that works in terms of overall timing. But it's a very good comment that's come from you all, and yes, it doesn't have to be from folks who were there. There's plenty of information for folks to review after the fact. So again, thank you all for your help, your participation, your energy and enthusiasm, and we will continue to push this forward together and continue to see positive change on the corridor. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you, Luke.
Thank you very much. See you next time.
Take care.
All right, Luke. Good job, Luke.
Thanks, Patrick.